Hi, so in this video I wanted to show you how to do record and playback of JMS messages on an IBM Webshere MQ broker. So to demo that, we're going to have this setup where System A and System B are going to be communicating with request and response messages. System A will be sending request messages to a request queue, which are then consumed by System B. And System B does some processing and after a while sends a response message to the response queue, which that message is going to be consumed by System A. So in order to do a recording of those messages, what we're going to have is the white bits you can see in here on this diagram, which is what you have already seen in the previous diagram. And then we're going to see the blue bits, which is the virtual service infrastructure to allow us to record those messages. So System A will be sending request messages to the virtual service request queue. Those messages will be consumed by the virtual service and forwarded to the real request queue. And then that message is consumed by System B. System B sends a response message to the response queue. That response message is consumed by the virtual service. And at this point, the virtual service has the request and response message, which means it can save the mapping between request to response messages and then forward the same response message to the virtual service response queue, which is then consumed by System A. So to keep this demo simple, what we're going to use, instead of real System A and real System B, we're going to use the MQ Explorer to pretend to be System A, and we're going to use MQ Explorer to pretend to be System B. And for the broker, we're going to use IBM MQ9. It's the development edition available via Docker. And the queue names. So for the request queue, we're going to name that queue request.ql. The response queue, we're going to name that queue rsp.ql. And the virtual service queues, we're going to name them tp.request.ql and tp.response.ql. So let's go ahead and do that. So first of all, we need to start the JMS recording. We're going to use external broker. We're going to record a queue. And we're going to record my Docker AWS IBM MQ9 instance. If you'd like to know how to configure more brokers here on this dropdown, just click this question mark and it's going to take you to the documentation where you're going to find how to configure more brokers here or different ones. So the virtual service recording, it's going to be recording from the virtual service request queue and passing those messages on to the real request queue. So recording from TP request QL and passing them on to request QL. Let's do that. So we got the request messages sorted. And now what about the response messages? Well, the virtual service will be recording from the rsp.ql queue and passing the messages on to tp.rsp.ql. Okay, so let's do that. Turn it on. And if you still find this confusing, the configuration of these queue messages and brokers, oh, there we go, it started. What I suggest is going to the documentation, traffic power documentation, and going to the JMS section, and going to recording using external brokers, queue record external broker. So this is the same diagram we have just seen, but what it has is actually mapping between the diagram and the user interface fields here. So hopefully it's going to be less confusing then. Okay, so back to our recording. The recorder is running. We can scroll to the very bottom and see that we've got the current recording session here. There are no messages there yet. So what we're going to use is we're going to start MQ Explorer and pretend to be System A and send a message to send a request message. So there we go. We got our MQ Explorer running here. I'm going to connect to my queue manager. And There we go. It's connected. Need to wait for a second for it to refresh the queue names. There we go. So what we're going to do is, again, pretend to be system A and send a request message. So we're going to be sending it to TP request QL. And we're going to put a test message, and the message is going to be an XML message. So I've got an example XML message here, which I'm just going to copy, paste here, put this message. Oh, my IBM MQ is slow today. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the slow internet connection today. Okay, there we go. So what we have done is put a request message onto the virtual service request queue. So what should have happened now is the virtual service should have consumed that message and forwarded it to the real request queue. So let's have a look if it's consumed it. So we go to traffic parrot user interface, and there we go. We can see that it's consumed a request message on the request queue, and there's the beginning of the payload of that message. Okay, and now has it actually forwarded that message to the real request queue? Well, we're going to find that out by going to MQ Explorer and looking at the real request queue and browsing those messages. Okay, it's opening my queue. There we go. So I've got my message here, and there it is. That's the message I have sent. So it did forward it. So what I'm going to do now is pretend to be system B and send a response message to the response queue. So again, we're here and we're pretending to be system B and sending a message to rsp.ql. And I've also got a sample XML response message here. So I'm just going to use that. Put test message. Okay, so what should have happened now is the virtual service should have picked up that message, created a mapping, and forwarded that message to the virtual service queue. Let's see if that has happened. So first of all, we can see the response queue. It's consumed it. Then it's created the mapping. So the mapping of request to response messages says that when you see a message on the request queue, request QL, and the text is going to be equal to this XML, then you should create a message on the response QL, and the response text message should be this. Okay? And has it forwarded that message to the TP RSPQL queue? Let's have a look at that. Browse those messages. There it is. That's the message we have sent. So all looks good. We can stop the recorder now. And we are left with one mapping. We can look at that mapping, and this mapping says that traffic parrot will look at this queue, consume messages from it, compare the body to this content, and if it matches, then it will return this response. Okay, so first of all, we probably don't want to compare equality. What we want to compare is XML equality. So let's go ahead and change that, since we're dealing with XML messages, not other messages. So you can compare different types of messages. What we're going to do is just compare the XML content. So the spaces, for example, don't matter. Okay, now we can see it's equal to XML in here. And now we can go ahead and replay that. So how would that work? Well, we're going to use the same queues. And there's no system B anymore. So what we're doing right now is testing system A, which is going to be a system under test in isolation. We don't need to have system B in place to do this testing of system A. Again, we're going to use MQ Explorer to pretend to be system A. So essentially, we're going to be testing MQ Explorer actually. And we're going to use IBM MQ9 again for the broker. Okay, so let's go ahead and replay those messages. We go to JMS replay, which is replaying queues. And we're going to be consuming requests from our IBM MQ9 broker and replaying responses to our IBM MQ9 broker. Is that right? The virtual service is consuming from IBM MQ9, looking at the responses and creating those responses on the same IBM MQ9 broker. Yes, so let's go ahead and start that. There we go, it's running. So now, what we're going to do is send a message to request.ql and expect a response on rsp.ql. Okay? So send a message to request.ql, and that message is going to be the message we've configured it with, which is this. I'm going to paste it there. You can't see it here, but it was actually the whole XML content. And now we expect something on the RSP. So, sorry, what happened right now is I've pretended to be system A. I send a request message to the request.ql. What should have happened now is that the virtual service should have consumed that message, looked up a response, and put that response on the response queue. So let's have a look if there is something on the response queue. And there we go, we got something here. It's been added just now. And it is indeed our message, the one we've configured it with. So this is how we were able to test our system A, in isolation. The virtual service looked up, consumed the request message, looked up a response, and put the response on the response queue. You can also see it in the logs what it does. So you go to JMS Logs and scroll to the very bottom, and what we're gonna see here is there we go. Sorry, can't find it. Oh yeah, there we go. So the virtual service was waiting for messages on request.ql. It's received a message on request.ql, and this was the message. And we can see there's the body. Okay. And then it's found a response. Sorry, there it is. It's found a match, so found a matching response, a mapping, and the mapping was sorry, it was, so this is the, again, this is the request. So it's received you can see in the logs that the virtual service has received the request, then that it's found a match in here, and the match was between our request and our response, and then it's created this response, and then it's sent at response. Yep, cool. So what we can do now is actually change that mapping and therefore change the response that gets returned to the user. Sorry, the system A. So what we're gonna do is go to replay again, turn off replay, and change this message. So let's say instead of returning a list of cities in this country here, I'm gonna get rid of that, and we're gonna say, for example, error. Yeah. So what that means is for the same request, we're gonna get an error response. And turn the replay on again. There we go. And now if we send a message, pretend to be system A again, and send a request message to the request queue, we're going to expect something on the response queue, but it's going to be a different message this time. So send our message to the request queue. The message is this. Same message. Put that message on the queue. There we go. And we expect something on the response queue. Browse the messages. And we expect our response, that error response that we've configured. And there we go. There's our error. This is what we've configured the virtual service to respond with for that particular request message. Okay, so that's how you can change these mappings actually and simulate hypothetical situations where you wouldn't be otherwise to simulate with a real system. You can also set up the test data this way. So if I turn the replay off and edit this mapping, basically you can put in the response body whatever you wish. So what that means is you're going to be able to set up any type of test data you like for any type of request as well. So we can see we got the country name Slovakia in here, but what you can do is do different types of matching, and it doesn't have to be Slovakia. You can match on XPaths, regexp, etc. If you'd like to know more about the details of editing the mappings and how powerful what you can do in here, actually, I suggest you go to the documentation, and you're gonna find a lot of things in here, especially on if we scroll to the very top and go to extensions. This is where you're going to find a lot of information on how to do advanced matching and advanced dynamic responses, for example. Because you can do a lot of things in here. Put, for example, request data from the request messages to the response messages and many other things. Just read through the documentation, and it's going to show you how to do that. Okay, so thanks for watching. I hope it was useful, and see you in the next video.